Hello, everyone. We're just starting. Thank you for joining us. Give it a few more minutes. And then if you have any questions after, we will have a question and answer session at the end. Give it a few more minutes. And once again, part one is up on the Global Cosmetic Cluster website. So if you want to see part one, it's a bit lengthy as I went over the limit and talked for about 2 hours on all the amazing things that Canada has to offer in terms of market potential. And today is a more practical session, really talking about how to set up the business, all the different avenues, corporate, partnership, and things like that. And give it a few more minutes and then we'll start. We'll start in a minute, and whoever's going to join will join us after, as we are running quite tightly on time today. Well, thank you everyone for joining. My name is Margarita, and I am the director of the Canadian Cosmetic Cluster. We are partnered in the first part of what we hope is many different market studies to talk about all the different clusters in the Global Cosmetic Cluster. What we do is we help bring information through these webinars about all the different countries that are part of our global group. I would say there's about maybe 15 to 20 of us now. And I decided to go first to talk about the Canadian market. And it's always going to be done in two parts. The first part is going to be all about market study, more of the trends, marketing information about the potentials of a country. And the second time is the practical information for setting up the business and how to kind of fast track with all the various resources that each country would have. Obviously, each country is different and they have the different specifications. In Canada, it's generally quite, in my opinion, quite simple. So we will start with talking about the Global Cosmetic Cluster. What is it? We are a global group around the world, as you can see, quite well represented from coast to coast of all the different continents. We have a mission to really bring together the global cosmetic industry by providing opportunities such as these webinars to really help accelerate global business in cosmetics. Myself included, I run the Canadian cluster. It's really our passion, especially on the educational front, is to share resources and promote all the different opportunities around the world, because together we are stronger. And this is a really great way in our global community to fast track if we have all these different countries and we have the best knowledge of how to get into the specific market. And I think this is why we have come together to really create all these different, we have events, we have webinars. We're coming up with Cosmetic Valley's 30th anniversary later on this week in France. So there's a lot of really wonderful ways to get involved, either with your local cluster or create your own if you're in an area. So quickly about me. So we are definitely focused a lot on education in our cluster, as well as we have the opportunities to provide support for businesses, export, import, regulatory is a big one, certifications, scale up. If you're at a certain stage and you want to scale up your company, we have about 300 companies. We do cover North America, so we also have quite a bit of members in the US, and then we have some international members as well. Generally, again, we're here to really support the industry through education, through business opportunities. There's a lot of different associations, but I think what a cluster really is, it accelerates the growth of an industry economically, and we're across the supply chain. We're not just about one thing. We're not just about products. We're about all the different avenues of the industry, and that's really how we look at it. And today we're going to talk about all the different avenues of making your business in Canada. So going back to regulatory, which is where we left off last time, but taking a look at it in a more comprehensive view. So in Canada, we have Health Canada. They're the ones who monitor our regulatory in terms of food, drugs. We have the natural health products, we have cosmetic products, and the drug products. Um, then we have some other additional regulatory, such as with sunscreen. We have cannabis infused products as well. It's very important to file. So if you're going to have a basic cosmetic product, and we'll look at the different requirements for that, you have to file your cosmetic notification form. It's a rather simple form. You file it online. You talk about what kind of product it is, how it's intended to be used. In my opinion, it's a bit of an outdated form. For example, the creams, mainly they're used as moisturizers. But again, this is going back to what is a cosmetic product. A cosmetic product really is supposed to enhance the appearance of skin, mainly dry skin through moisturization. So all of this really is what's already on the market. It ties to what a cosmetic product really is. If you want to do more claims, you have the natural health product category, you have the drug category. So the labeling requirements are very important to know is in English and in French. You have to identify the products, what the product is, the quantity, the list of ingredients, specific warnings, usage instructions, and then a contact information so they can contact the company. If you're a foreign company in Canada and you are not yet registered as a business, you have to use a responsible person, just like you do in Europe or in the UK and some other countries. It's really important to do the notifications as they say legally 10 days before your product goes on the market. I would say give it 3 months if you can, at least a month before. The thing is, Health Canada is not the fastest service in the world. So it will take them probably about 6 months to 8 months to review a label. If they find anything wrong with your label, it could be the wording. It could be they just don't like the wording. And it doesn't matter if you have 3 other products that you found on the market already sitting there with the exact same words. They don't like it. They don't like it. You have to change it. So if you do your notifications and you don't hear back from them for 3 months, and then here comes the time, they tell you you have to pull the product and change the labeling, you're already selling because you did the notifications. They didn't respond. Everything was good. You did everything by the book, but they do have the ability to let you know a year from when you're selling that they've decided that the label's wrong. You have to change the label. So then you're kind of set on this whole ride of basically changing all the labels to get your products compliant. And it's I think it's up to 15,000. It was 10,000. Now it's up to 15,000 for any issues that can happen with this. So it is quite expensive if you run into any issues with Health Canada in terms of notifications, if you don't have the proper information, the proper labels. In Quebec, especially, it's very important to have labels that are English and French. The English cannot be bigger than the French. It has to be equal, very important to know. And I will show you an example. So this is just an example of the difference between cosmetic and drug. If you're having a drug or a natural health product, which is a very interesting category that we're going to talk about, you can see right here. So you have your therapeutic claim, which you don't have here. Here you have your name, what it is in English and French, and then the net worth. So here you have your active ingredient, which is benzoyl peroxide gel, which is clearly acne bacteria related, and you have your drug number. This could also be a natural health product. The natural health product will look a little bit different. This would be an NPN. You would have your claim, and then you would also have your ingredients, which, for example, could be sulfur at 4% or 2%. So everything that you go for is determined on your claims and what ingredients you use. So this is an example of claims, therapeutic versus non-therapeutic. So non-therapeutic is going to be cosmetic, therapeutic is going to be towards drug and natural health products. So, for example, healing dry skin. And as we talked just recently about the moisturization, how mainly what a cream or a serum or anything can do for the skin is to moisturize or to cleanse. This really reflects our laws and what a cosmetic product should be. It really shouldn't do more than strengthen the skin. Everyone talks about skin barriers. It can only do that via moisturization. It cannot really reduce, it can improve the look. So it's all about really surface things. It can replenish, it can help with only dry skin. It can clean. Cleansing is a big part of cosmetics, right? From the teeth to the hair to the skin, you're cleansing. And then you have skin that looks younger, but isn't. You can't prove it. It just appears. Appears, looks, is a big part of these words that you have to use. Anything that actually repairs damaged skin, the moisture barrier, heals, calms, irritation, is moving into this other category. So eliminating age spots, you have to reduce the look of age spots. Even if the big companies out there, which they often will pay that fee, because they're advertising something they shouldn't. Many of the small to medium companies obviously cannot, and they really have to stick. Again, some smaller companies don't follow the book and they get away with it for a few years, but at any time, Health Canada can come and you'll have issues and nobody wants. So being compliant from the start is easier. When you're just starting, I always say, get all your ducks in a row, get everything ready to go to the market. So then you don't have any problems as you grow. Because as you grow, as you get more popular, I will say, especially in Canada, the more you grow, the more popular you get. That's when you're going to get the calls. The way that Health Canada works is it's a post-market surveillance. So once you're in the market, if there's any issues, and how do the issues happen? It won't be your customers. Most likely, I will tell you, it is your competitors calling. You have so many brands that say, Health Canada won't leave us alone. And then you have, I just had someone recently tell me that they were working at a bigger company. Health Canada was checking everything, kept finding things wrong. She moved away, has her own little brand that no one knows about. Health Canada is not completely, like, they have no issues. They file, they get all the labels approved, everything goes on. So it really is about competitors calling on you. It's a very known, unfortunate tactic in Canada. So that's just something to know. So if you're going to become popular, especially get everything done in the beginning, because you will have problems at the end. I really like this label. We're going to look at some labels because it's important to know. I have to say a lot of products really aren't as compliant, but this Neutrogena is by the book. Johnson & Johnson is obviously up that level that they're going to do everything right. So this is a great, because this is, everything is in English and French. The only thing is Hydro Boost, which is like the trade name that does not have to be translated, but everything else is translated perfectly. For the front, you can see this is a great example because you have the actual container or the bottle, you have your box, and you have the back of the box. It has all the information ready to go. This, in my opinion, is the perfect label of how you really have to aim for. Everything is perfectly translated, because I personally do have an issue with some companies. They do not bother translating everything. They will do the front, but on the back, they will not translate. They will do the ingredients, and it's standard INCI ingredients that everyone in our industry, I'm sure, knows, as it's the same in many countries. But when it comes to directions or more of the marketing information, I have noticed not everyone does the full translation. So I am very happy to see that a lot of the bigger companies are following. And most of the time it is like that. So let's talk about natural health products, because this is a very interesting aspect of our industry that not a lot of people are aware of. I don't think many countries have natural health product sectors. Usually it's cosmetic and drug, but in Canada, we decided to do this additional pathway. We'll talk about all the benefits of this pathway, because I think from a selling point of view, it's a really great opportunity, though it has some downsides. Mainly wait times is the only downside. The wait times are intense as of this moment, as Health Canada is rather understaffed. So natural health product assessment, we have class 1. So if you're going to do class 1, first of all, what is it? Natural health products are basically a category where you're using herbal, traditional, homeopathic claims. It could be Chinese herbs. You can go by the monographs. So Health Canada has several monographs on different types of herbs, on sunscreens. So you can do mineral sunscreens with zinc and titanium oxide. You can do acne products that we saw, for example, in the example, benzyl alcohol, which is an acne for drug, but sulfur, I would say a few other ingredients. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I just recently worked with sulfur, so I know for a fact sulfur is an acne approved on the more natural side of the spectrum for acne monograph. We also have irritation, so medicated skincare. For medicated skincare, oat, paraffin wax. We have things like olive oil, I believe. So there's definitely a big class of that. Kaolin clay. So that is things that are predetermined by our government. So it's a really fast track. If you're going into class 1, it's a lot easier to get in and get things going in terms of getting your natural health product number. If you're following the monograph. So I definitely really recommend following the monographs. There's minerals, there's herbs. They're basically of natural origins. And it's a really great way to get access to better claims, because the minute you have access to a claim that's non-irritation, as we saw before, generally irritation and skin redness is a drug claim. But this gives you access to that category of claims while sitting in this area that's already been pre-approved. And it's really all according to risk and the labeling standards. What I like about this category is it is easy to apply. So in terms of cost, you don't need as much cost. You just have to either file yourself or work with an accredited body that will help you with all your labeling. One of the big factors I find with this process is time. And I think it's important to know that to get a natural health product number, you have to have a natural health product site license. So it's site license plus product. When you're applying for your site license, they will ask you what products you plan on producing or what you are currently producing within that realm. So it is a bit confusing if you're filing alone as a company. You will have to have a license for the entire production site, and then you're going to have to do your product numbers. The site license currently takes probably about a year to produce. It's a good thing to go after if you're definitely going after more of the semi-cosmeceutical claims. It's a great, it saves you money because having a drug license is very costly, at least probably 300,000, if not more right now. So this would be a great way to get into that category of claims without spending too much money, but you're still going to be spending upwards of at least $4,000 to $5,000, if not more, to get at least one product on the market. If you're going to have a site license for where you're producing, you don't have to be in Canada. We do have foreign licenses available. The big thing is being GMP compliant, having all of your protocols, all of your soaps, all of your standard practices available where you're taking into account all of the different products that you're producing under this NHP. It has to have a different section of your production site. You have to have different storage. You have to monitor them a lot more closely than you would with regular cosmetics. But I think personally, this is a really great example of what you can achieve. It's quite good in my opinion. Again, class 1, class 2, class 3. So product licenses, or PLAs as they're called, all medicinal ingredients. I would definitely recommend going to class 1, because if you already have something and it's under the monograph, it's a lot easier. The 60-day time is, I would say, very generous. To be honest, right now, we're all looking at a class 3 of 200. I would say 210 days in total, 30 days. Like, this is the official one that the government will give you. I'm telling you, you will have to wait. It is a huge wait. We're just severely understaffed in most of the government offices. So even though these are the official times, give yourself a year to a year and a half to get this done. So it is a lengthy process. Is it better to file multiple at once? I would recommend yes, because it will be kind of done in a bigger chunk. Other than that, I think this is a great opportunity for many companies going more into the medicinal cosmetic claims. If you have no problem with wait times, go for it. Another thing is if you're working with a site company that's already has a site license, it could be in Canada or it can be abroad. There is a list of foreign registries on the Natural Health Product Health Canada website. So you can find products in your potentially sites, manufacturers in your country that have these types of licenses. It's only valid for Canada, so I will tell you that. We are not connected to the FDA or the United States in any way. We have our own, so this is just for Canada. So this is an example of a product that has a DIN, which is a drug license. And the reason for that is looks like your typical cosmetic product, but no, it has the DIN, and you can see because it has an SPF claim. And when you look at the actual ingredients, they are not mineral, they're chemical sunscreens. So this is really what you're dealing with in terms of a label. So really important is to have warnings. These are not a lot of working with NHP or drug, especially on the NHP side. People do not like just how much you have to have in terms of warnings. They do not like the ask of doctors and things like that. It's mandatory. If you're going away from, I would say, sunscreens into more of the skin irritants, it actually will look like a medical label in many cases. And I know a lot of brands have a problem with that. They want the benefits of having it non-irritating and having this category, but they do not actually want to go into this fully in terms of aesthetics, because we're in cosmetics. You want to have beautiful products. So I would say this is a very interesting category to kind of be in the natural health aspect. So how to apply, once again, you're determining if you're due the claims, you're adjusting your labels, you're getting your documents ready, good manufacturing practices, and then you really have to have all of your steps, all of your product files for each single product that you want to produce. If you're working with the manufacturer, they're going to have their own, they're going to kind of take you on, they're going to do it for you. But yes, you're going to have an established site license, and then you're going to have to file online through their web-based. I do not like this because instead of having a PDF file, you will have the HTML web-based file. I do not like this, but this is the way it is. So you can only access it again through their website. You cannot just open and look at your file on PDF or any other resource. I don't like this. It's the same thing with health notification. So the entire system, once upon a time, yes, it was PDF. Now it is only web-based. In my opinion, it's a little bit harder to navigate, but it is what it is. You can review your products, submit it. And how do they communicate with you? Can you call them? No. Can you email them? Not really. How do you communicate with Health Canada? It's through Canada's Post electrical e-post system, which is discontinued across Canada, except only for Health Canada, basically communication purposes, and a few other signatures that are available through government. You have to log on to this website through Canada Post, make your account, and then you'll be able to communicate through messaging system with Health Canada through only this way. I do have to say they are quite responsive. They will talk to you. They will ask you questions. You will be sending your documents back through this, not through the online original form. You will be sending, if they say, you know what, we want to redo the labels, we want you to redo some steps, you have to re-sign the document, this is done wrong. You will have to communicate through eCanada's post system. And they are quite responsive. So it can be a bit of a pain to get a hold of, but once you're there, you are able to communicate. You really can't call or email them. So they're a bit mysterious that way, which is quite frustrating for many companies. I'll be very honest with you. Another thing to keep in mind is you are able to do this with a responsible person. So you do not have to be here physically. You are able to do this through a responsible person to get your foreign products registered. So that is a possibility. So let's go into business registration. Business registration, there's definitely lots of different options for us. Across Canada. You can do it. Canada is very big, and unlike other countries, our provinces are fairly independent from each other. We have different healthcare, we have different education, we have different laws. So if you're living, for example, in Ontario or Quebec or British Columbia, you have 3 different systems that are not connected. We do have our federal corporation status, which we'll talk about. But other than that, we are quite fragmented from, so if you're moving your business, you're going to have to register in a different province again. If you're doing province to province registration, you could technically only be in 2 provinces instead of all across Canada if that's what you think works better for you. And there's definitely advantages and disadvantages. Sole business ownership is the most basic one. If you're a proprietor, you have the ability to register quite quickly. It's a fee that you're going to pay to your province in most cases. And then it's easy, it's fast, you have full control. Taxation, the income is taxed on your personal income. So you're not paying corporate tax, and it's definitely a lot lower and it's a lot quicker. The only thing in Canada is obviously because it's not a corporation, you are personally responsible for your business debts and you are personally responsible for anything that goes wrong. Again, if you know the Canadian system, I wouldn't, as a small business, in terms of liabilities in Canada, we are not the United States. People cannot sue each other like crazy. Our civic, so if you do, we have different courts. You have criminal, you have civil court, and we have our family court. So we have 3 court systems generally. So business will be under civil. If you're going to have a dispute, you have small claims, which is, I believe, under 20,000, 25,000. Then you have the larger scale courts. And we have 2 legal systems. We have common law in Canada, and then we have only in Quebec, we have civic law. So common law is our good old British law, really based on precedent. Because it's based on precedent, it's these things take time. Nobody really sues anyone because unless you want to spend the next 5 to 10 years in court suing each other back and forth with no one winning except the lawyers, it's not really a big concern, I would say, unless you're at a bigger level. And then usually the times that I've seen companies really get into trouble is when they're in the United States and they have lawsuits there that really seem to be impactful. Here, we're generally a little bit, the only kind of thing that really happens, I would say, if you are a small business in Canada, is suing for broken contracts. If somebody didn't pay you. This happens a lot, believe it or not. Even with a contract, contracts get defaulted on all the time. And this is most likely what would end up in court versus something going wrong with your business and you getting sued by a client. This does not happen a lot. Funding is also more challenging to attract investors. For most of the government grants and a lot of the export programs, you do have to be a corporation of at least 1 year before you can apply for funding for certain corporate grants. And again, business is often linked to continuing growth. You are limited in that factor. A partnership is when 2 or more businesses or 2 individuals come together to have a partnership. Partnerships are great because you can definitely pool resources with taxes, but you definitely have joint liability for the business debts. This is something really important to know about liability and in terms of debts in Canada. It's something very serious, especially I would say if you are a business owner and you're married, your partner can be often responsible unless you're in a corporate status. This is something important, I would say, especially to a lot of women to know, because you can get roped into having debt for someone's business that you're not particularly involved with because you're married. This is something that I've seen happen to people. Disputes can happen. And again, even if you have a signed contract, it can be disputed at any point. I think this is something that really needs to be considered before you go into a partnership, is to figuring out all the legal responsibilities. And even if you sign a contract and everything is supposed to work out, I would always have a plan B or C, because if it doesn't go out the way you want it to do and you have to go back into court, what are your next steps? Finally, corporations, which we have public and private, just like in many other countries. And this is something that is often most recommended when you're coming to Canada. So we also have two different types of corporations. We have a one in your province, provincial ones, and then you have your federal corporations. And that definitely is different on the taxation scale. Disadvantages of a corporation, the advantages obviously are the liability and the tax benefits, raising capital. It is more complex to file the taxing as in every other country. So I wouldn't say it's quite different, but really regulatory compliance is a little bit different. It's a little bit more, especially if you're a public corporation, you have your shareholders, you have a lot more accountability in that sense, which is good because you have more not just protection in terms of the law from liability, but when you have more compliance, you'll definitely run a better company, in my opinion. So definitely starting a business, you have to choose a business name, register the business. Sometimes if you're doing a corporate, you have to file the corporation business name search. Corporation filings can be done through a lawyer. You can do it yourself. It doesn't if you know the system and you're comfortable with English or French, because we have two. I wouldn't say this is something that requires a lawyer all the time. In my opinion, you can easily do this yourself if you have business knowledge. You can do that quite easily. Obtaining necessary licenses and permits, depending on what you're doing. For cosmetics, if you're selling, you don't really particularly need anything. Manufacturing requires the manufacturing. You have to be in a commercial zone within Canada to do manufacturing or selling. Another thing for taxes, you have to go apply for your business number with the CRA, which is our Canadian Revenue Agency, which is where we send all our tax dollars to. And then you have the registration for GST, which is the provincial tax, which everyone has to pay, payroll if you're having employees, and other taxes. Generally, and we're going to look at taxes from province to province, it does vary. We are very different from province to province. I don't think people realize that for example, in Alberta, we don't have sales tax, which is amazing, but we do have it in Ontario where I'm based. Setting up your business bank account is important. And then we're going to look at some of the banks that are available to do that. We generally have 5 big banks. So quite a little bit more easier to do, I think, because we have quite a bit of options. And we have some smaller banks, but we're just going to talk about the big banks for now. And again, complying with an employment law, understanding employment, again, federal and provincial. It's very important to know federal and extremely important to know provincial because it does change from province to province. In Quebec, it's a little bit different. If you're going to be registering, a lot of, especially French speakers and people from France come to Quebec and they will register with in just the province of Quebec because it's definitely easier, fast track, and a streamlined process to do this compared to federal and corporation lower fees. It's a really great option, especially for small and medium companies starting. And there's definitely a lot of support if you're French speaking in Quebec. It's a very easy, I would say, process. The downside of this is you're kind of then stuck in the Quebec province area, and you're kind of out of the ability to really sell across all of Canada, which honestly is a big market. If you're selling across Canada, it's just, Canada already is a smaller, we're big physically, small on terms of population. So the reason that this is a negative is you're really trying to reach your consumer. This is the biggest part of doing business in Canada, is this nonstop challenge to always reach as many people as you can, because people are spread out. They're in different parts of, our provinces are almost like different countries in many ways. We have different climates, we have different priorities, different laws, different ways of living in many ways. So it can be a challenge. So when you're stuck in one province, in terms of market growth, you are definitely in many ways preventing yourself from a better future. But to get started, I would say this is a great step. If you're going step by step, there's no way, there's no better way to quickly fast track into a market is to go the provincial route. Corporate tax. So corporate tax rates do vary province by province. So here is a great example. I am in Ontario, and we have the corporate tax rate at 11.5%. You have so these are territories and provinces. It all varies depending on where you are. So it's good to know where you plan to be and what you plan to do. And on top of that really is our federal, which is 15% of the taxable income. So small businesses can definitely benefit from reduced tax rates. This is something that is ongoing. And this is a great example on how the federal income is taxed. So 15% on the first, 20.5, and then yes, altogether, it can go up to 33%. And again, this is your personal income rate. Ontario is quite high, but not as high as Quebec or some of the other provinces. Alberta is one of our probably most tax-friendly, I would say, countries. Provinces. They are very good in attracting residents for this reason from all across Canada. People are very, very attracted to Alberta. A lot of people say they have lower taxes because they are an oil producing province. Maybe that's the reason, but it definitely depends. It's quite a big gap, like up to 10% if you go from province to province, depending on where you are. This is an example. Again, these slides will be available, so we're not going to quite just briefly go into this as an example of how the taxing is done federally and provincially. I think this is a great one. For example, in Ontario, you have your federal, you have your provincial, and altogether, this is how much you would pay at the end of the year. Let's talk about spas. Spas are a big part of our industry. A lot of businesses that come are within the aesthetic realm and they want to open. And it's a big, if you're opening a spa, you do have to be hiring a licensed estheticians. You cannot do hair. You cannot do any of the aesthetic things without certifications. You can own the business, yes, but you cannot practice. Even so, this is something important to know: is you have to be retrained and you have to get all the licensing requirements done. You have to register and have your. Usually, you have a city. Usually, it's the city that will do your inspections. It's not the province; it's the city. So it is a municipal. So that's another set of requirements that you have to do, depending on this city to city, province to province. And then with Quebec, again, it's the language. You have to have the French. You can get away with doing English, and the others, you have to have information up to a certain level in Ontario and the other provinces. But for Quebec, it's definitely, you have to have French with English, but French has to be number one. So navigating business life, we'll spend some time talking about our banks and about some of our other support systems. So the regulatory framework, we have 5 big banks. We have CIBC, we have the Royal Bank of Canada, RBC, Toronto Dominion Bank TD, which is actually my bank. We have Bank of Nova Scotia, Scotiabank, which is right here, BMO, Bank of Montreal, and then we also have this bank right here, which is Canadian National Bank. So technically 6, but the 5 are the big banks that are most often talked about. They're different from bank to bank. It really depends on what you they're generally the same, but they have different offers, and that's generally up to a personal preference. There is definitely a system with the National Bank of Canada. If you are from France, they have a joint, they have an accelerated joint partnership. So it's easier to get an account. You can get an account in here, and you can get an account in France quite easily if you're just with this one. There's also Desjardins, which is another bank that helps with the France to Canada. We also have the Hong Kong Bank. We have a few other banks that are international, but these are really the ones that you're going to be dealing with. You'll get a business card, which can be quite, we just had a bank issue with one of our members, and actually one of our team members. It took them about, I would say, 3 to 4 months to get their banking card. It can be quite challenging to get a credit card as well. They're going to want proof of business. They're going to want proof of sales, which is hard. So oftentimes you have to put cash aside to get a credit card in the beginning. The banks can help with loans. Banks can help with mortgages. Banks can help with all sorts of sometimes they give you taxing advice, investing advice. They definitely do a lot. I will say that I don't know about other countries, but in Canada, if you are a bank employee and a lot of your income does come from selling services. I'm sure this is in every country, but they are often commission based. And when they're selling you services and insurances and things like that, it is important to remember that they are working on commission. So they will offer you everything, and you don't have to legally take everything they offer you. But they will try to get you to invest as much as you can, obviously, and all their different funds because they are commission workers. We have BDC, which is the Business Development Bank of Canada. So this is a federal crown corporation. What is a crown corporation? Don't forget that we are part of the Commonwealth. So that's why we have the common law system. If you ever go to court, it used to be the Queen versus you, or now it's the King. So we are still involved with the monarchy in many ways on our documents, and how a lot of in certain ways, which I think for certain countries, it can be a bit of a surprise. The bank is really dedicated to helping entrepreneurs. It is really dedicated to helping businesses to grow and to advance. They have a lot of services that are dedicated to helping expansion. They have services where if you're a small business and you're looking to acquire another business, or you're looking to growth, if you're looking to expand, especially into manufacturing, this is a really great option. They do not do grants, but they do loans at a quite reasonable rate. And they're able to work with you. And they're really specialized. This is a business bank. They're really there to help businesses across Canada succeed. Obviously, it's a loan, so you will have to pay it back. You will have to work with them, but they do have a team of advisors that will help with the business development, business planning. So they are working. Not only do they provide you with the money, but on a business scale, they are trying to help you succeed, so you're able to, have long-term financial success. They are very well invested into different types of innovation. They do have access to grants, so they do talk about grants. And they do talk about all the different options for new businesses. And here we have some of the other, support systems within Canada. There's obviously a lot more than this, but we're just going to kind of talk about the basic ones. We have Canadian Small Business Financing, which is a federal program. One of the most famous ones we have is the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Program, SR&ED. This is a really popular program all across Canada. If you're in biotech, if you're developing ingredients, if you're developing formulas that need a little bit more work with the science team, this will help you get money back. It's a really great program. I think many businesses do not take full advantage, but I do know quite a bit of companies, especially in the raw materials sector. This can also be applied for if you're doing plastics and, for example, you're developing new plastic prototypes or new packaging prototypes. All of this can be under scientific research, and you can apply for this credit. Again, loans and financing, BDC, and then we also have the EDC, which is just dedicated to export development, and they help with export missions and things like that. I will tell you that the Canadian definition of small business is very specific. They're going to want to see at least $500,000 for some of the grants, up to $2 million in revenue, or at least in gross profit. Like, they want quite a bit of things, which is really hard for small business to prove. And at the end of the day, of all these resources, when you kind of sit down and you kind of write everything out, it's really hard to get into loans and into financing and into grants. We do not have, in practicality, a lot of grants in Canada. We do have the Canadian Business Network. Futurepreneur Canada is a nonprofit which helps with business plans and financing, and they're from 18 to 39, and they're kind of dedicated to building up young resource. A really good system. But I will tell you, I do a lot of trade missions. I do a lot of export. I do a lot of business development, and a lot of people that come into the door, they do not qualify. It's a very slim, especially for the business development aspect, it's a very slim opportunity to get a grant right now in Canada. A grant that matters. I'm not talking about $2,000 for digital, that you're updating your website. I think the digital grant is $2,000 to $3,000 to becoming. It's called digital storefront, where you're helping to boost your website. Because a good business, developer for web will charge you anywhere from 3 to 5 to do or redo a whole system, if not more. So that 2,000 to 3,000 will cover a little bit of it, but not everything. And in terms of, really getting for cosmetics, unfortunately, we do not fall within the Canadian realm. The biotech aspect, maybe. But right now, I will tell you, if you're in mining, if you're in clean energy, if you're in manufacturing, mainly towards more automotive, some of the agricultural causes get support. For cosmetics, if you're looking for support, I will be honest, the reality is Canada really isn't the place for it. You're going to have to go looking at venture capitalists and of that sort, because we're just not very strong to support this type of industry at the moment. Associations, so we have Cosmetic Alliance, which was the Canadian Cosmetic Toiletry Fragrance Association. They provide regulatory and legislative. They're kind of our lobby group. They do a lot of really great lobbying for the industry. They're definitely the ones who help with Health Canada, and they did a lot of work with sunscreens. They did a lot of work with microplastics. So things like that, they're really good at. We have the Canadian Society of Cosmetic Chemists, which is part of the International Society of Cosmetic Chemists. Our branch is actually really heavily linked to the New York branch. So all of the bigger events will be in New York or in America. We have some local events here. The Society of Cosmetic Chemists is oddly in Quebec and is oddly in Ontario, but not really for the rest of Canada. I did not understand why. I don't know if it's a reason. I do know for a fact that there's a lot of chemists in the West Coast. They often have to get involved with the California cosmetic chemists kind of branches or the Midwest. So that's generally the way that works. Just with all the other IFCC kind of branches, it's mainly about the organic chemistry, the formulation aspect, and I would say very heavily influenced by the actual companies that do manufacturing and the ones that really do, it's really ingredient, supplier, distributor heavy in North America. And then we have the cluster, and we help with all sorts of innovation management, product acceleration, business development. And yes, now we're definitely on time today. Any questions about anything? You'll get a copy. I know that this recording will be up in probably the next week, and we'll have the slides available as well to download. Any questions? We'll also have my contact available if anyone has any questions further. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining. If you have any more I guess ideas or any more in-depth questions about the taxing or about regulatory, you can reach me through both the Global Cosmetic Cluster and the Canadian Cosmetic Cluster website. Thank you so much. And just quickly, our next webinars in September is the Japan. Japan is going to have the exact same series, exact same format. And in November, Italy is going to be presenting. And then next year, we'll have a few countries as well. I think the UK was interested, and so was France and a few others. So our goal really is to build up a library of these webinars. So if you want to go to Italy, if you want to go to Canada, if you want to go to France, all of this is available for you. you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.